Hello Saints, welcome in for another midweek video. Yesterday at Abundant Life Church, many of you were there, there was talk about the members of the body and the body of Christ and the function that we all have toward one another, and it got me to thinking about 1 Corinthians 12, but more particularly 1 Corinthians 13. I'm not going to read anywhere close to all, but 1 Corinthians 12 teaches us that just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body. And of course, you could insert there, just as the human body is one. We have one human body made up of many parts. And he says, so it is with Christ, or so it is with the body of Christ. And God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. And then Paul uses as an example, he says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I do not need you. Or the head cannot say to the feet, I have no need of you. Can't do it. It's just not possible in the human body, and it's not possible in the body of Christ. He goes on to say in verse 27 of chapter 12, he says, now you are the body of Christ and individually members of it. You, assuming that you're watching this video, having been born from above by the Spirit of God and regenerated by the power of God, that you are a member of the body of Christ. All of us are part of the body. The body is one, and yet each individual member makes up that body. And one of the things that I don't know that we overlook it, but we don't think about it often. Since I was a young teenager, I would hear the reading of what's called the love chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And there's so much in that chapter, you could study it for a long time. And if you did much digging, you would be there a while. I want to point out that chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians is written in the context of chapter 12. Remembering that when Paul wrote this letter to the church of Corinth, he didn't have verses. He didn't have chapter divisions. He just wrote a letter. And so when he got to what we call the end of chapter 12, and he says, I will show you a more excellent way, he didn't make a division there. He just went right into what we call chapter 13. Let's think of chapter 13 in light of being members of the body of Christ, in light of relating to other members of the body of Christ. And think of it in those terms. Now, it applies in a broader spectrum, in a broader sense, but let's remember that when Paul wrote it, he wrote it with this in his mind. You are members of the body of Christ. You are all individually members of one body. And then he says, I'll show you a more excellent way. And then he, of course, begins what we call the love chapter. He said, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, and he deals in chapter 14 with the speaking in tongues, but I have not love, I'm just making a bunch of noise. Excuse the Granger paraphrase, but that's basically what he says. And if I have prophetic powers, everybody wants to prophesy. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, don't we all want that? And if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I don't have love, then I am nothing. Again, context of the body of Christ. If I give away all that I have, and I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Now, let me just stop right there. A lot of us, because we've been taught that a social gospel is the gospel, or the gospel is a social gospel, or a social justice gospel, we would think that if we give away all that we have, then that is love. Well, it may be love that motivates us to do that, but that's not exactly what love is. And then Paul goes on to describe what agape really looks like. Again, context of the body of Christ, context of members of the body of Christ, and that we need each other. When he writes the verse, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. The head cannot say to the foot, I have no need of you. He is implying, inferring, and directly telling us that we cannot say to another member of the body of Christ, I have no need of you. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite is true. We need fellow members of God's church, of God's body. We need each other. And that's how it has different applications, but at the end of the day, every member of the body of Christ needs members of the body of Christ. So he goes on to explain this. He says, now love is patient. In a better word there probably would be love is long sufferings. It's not that just that love says you can pat your foot forever and be patient about it. It's that you have the ability to suffer for a long time. How many of you know that if you have human beings in your life, you're going to suffer? So you might as well suffer for a long time. He said, love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy. So if you're envious, guess what that's not? Love does not boast. It is not arrogant. Doesn't draw attention to itself. It's not rude. Love does not insist on its own way. Oh, me. Love is not irritable. Love is not resentful, and really that's better translated. The ESV translates as resentful. That's really better translated, keeps no record of wrongs. You don't keep a ledger of what people have done against you. Love does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I'll read that again. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. He said prophecies, they're going away. Tongues, they're going away. Knowledge, it's going to pass away. But love, at the end of the day, faith, hope, and love will abide. And the greatest of these is love, agape. As we relate to one another as members of the body of Christ, as we allow God to fit us together, how many of you know the fitting process is not comfortable? The fitting process can be, and I don't mean physically, but it can be painful. As we learn to adjust to one another, all you got to do is get married, you figure that out. That you take a completely different human being and species, male, and you put them together with a completely different human species called female, and you put them together for the rest of their lives. Well, there's some adjustments to be made. There's some attitudes to be laid down, and it's a lifelong process. Let me tell you, approaching 50 years of marriage, I can tell you that it's a lifelong process that we go through. The same applies in the body of Christ as we relate to one another. And I think that's why Paul writes this passage about what agape looks like, because he just talked about relating to one another in the body of Christ. So how about we take chapter 13 and apply it into chapter 12, and where possible and able, we relate to one another in true agape, in true love. So I don't know what agape is. I encourage you to look it up. I encourage you to study and find out what that exactly is. Jesus said, they'll know you're my disciples if you have love one for another. Let's prove to the world that we are his disciples. You have a great week and have a great day today, and go out there and act like somebody. Good day.